So we're continuing a series that I think actually will be appropriate for what we just did this morning. We're continuing a series through the Sermon on the Mount, and we've been talking about living the red letters. The red letters, if you had the old King James Bible growing up, or even current day, some Bibles still do it. They put the words of Jesus in red. So the Sermon on the Mount is all red. It's actually the longest teaching we have of Jesus, that single discourse of Jesus. And it's incredible. Now, it's tough. It's tough because the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is drawing a comparison of what the world says this life is to be and what He says, what God's kingdom, and we talk about it by saying things like kingdom living, what kingdom living is like. And what kingdom living, I think what that is living Jesus' way. It's living Jesus' way as opposed to what the world says, this is what we do. And there is a stark contrast, a very strong contrast. Now, let me just remind you, so Jesus had been traveling about, he had covered some ground. And for this particular teaching, there had been crowds. He had gone to many different cities, and he goes up on a hillside, and he calls his disciples to him. And so we get the sense that there are other followers as well as disciples, but it's clear that this is teaching for those who say, I'm following Jesus. This are those of us that have said this is the choice we make. We're servants of Christ, and these are the words that he has. So the first week we talked about how the need to have purpose in our life. And Jesus said our purpose is to be salt and to be light. And how when we have purpose, it takes the panic away. It gives us focus. It gives us direction. And then last week, we looked at the Lord's Prayer and then the prayer that Jesus gave us, as well as just his call to say, hey, be real. Be real. Get rid of the false stuff. All this trying to impress other people and giving or praying and big words and long prayers and offerings that make a nice crash into the offering plate. Stop it. He says, stop it. He says, get real, be honest. And then go in private and go pray. Because when you're in private, your reward is coming from God. It's not coming from all the accolades of other people. And then he goes on, actually, there's a little bit of scripture between where we're picking up today and where we stopped off last week, and he's talking about fasting. And fasting, it's the same message that he was giving with the giving and the prayer. And he says, hey, don't do that so people think you're spiritual. Don't walk around like this, oh, I haven't eaten in 3 days because I'm fasting. Oh, woe with me, don't you feel sorry for me? Jesus says, no. He says, go wash your face. Put your clothes on. Hold your head up. It's a private act between me and you. Don't try to get accolades from it. And it's this message of, hey, be real. Be honest. Be honest with your Heavenly Father. And that's where we're going to be picking up today. We're in Matthew chapter 6. And we're going to look at verses 19 through 24. So I'm going to read to us. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body, and if your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Okay, let's see if we can unpack this a little bit, because it almost feels like three kind of separate things going on here. But I think they're all connected, very much connected. And it's all part, if Jesus is sitting on this hillside and he's teaching, he's not doing what our Bibles do. Our Bibles say, okay, this is on fasting. So he's not going, okay, pause everybody. Now we're going to talk about fasting. And now we're going to talk about treasures. No, he's just teaching. So it all blends together. It's all part of the same message. Let's see if we can unpack this a little bit. So he starts off by saying, don't store up temporary treasures. Temporary treasures. What are treasures? Well, those things that we say, oh, this is valuable. This matters. This is my most precious thing. I've heard it said, and you guys probably have heard this analogy, if you want to figure out what is like most valuable to you, if you had to go through your house in like 2 minutes and grab something, what would it be that you grabbed? You know, if you had to make those decisions real quick, or would you? Or would you go, hey, I got my family, I'm good to go. And those kind of, it's that idea of temporary things Jesus is saying. He's not saying some of them don't have value. He said, don't put all your energy in just that. He said, because here's the problem with it. They go away like that, don't they? I mean, they go away so fast. So when he gives these analogies of this, in this time, the crowd he would be speaking to, expensive clothes would be a sign of wealth. I don't know if that's really, maybe that's true today a little bit, but you know, we can go to Goodwill and buy expensive clothes today. So it's different today. But during that time, it would have been obvious. If you had on a robe that was of value, think about the story of Joseph and the coat of many colors. Something colorful like that would have been tremendously expensive. So people would wear expensive stuff, and everybody knew they had money. They would know that. And so Jesus is saying, if you're storing up that kind of thing, be aware of this, something as insignificant as a moth. A moth. I mean, are you kidding me? A little moth can destroy it. That's how temporal our stuff is. And then he says, and then if you're putting your treasures away, that thieves can come in. So during this time, houses were built out of mud. Out of mud, dried mud. Not bricks like we know them, but kind of, you know. But it would be so simple, you literally could take something sharp and poke a hole in the wall. Make a hole, go get what you want. And so oftentimes people took strong boxes, is what they called them. They had boxes, and they put their valuable possessions in it, and they dug a hole in the floor of their house, which would have been dirt floor oftentimes, and they dug and they buried it because they had to have a way to protect it. They didn't have a security system like we did. So Jesus again saying, this temporary stuff that we're gathering, it is so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable. It can be taken away. And so he says, don't put all your investment, your heart, your energy, everything you've got into that. Because like this, it's gone. Like this, it can be gone. So then he's talking about, actually, let me share this idea with you too. When he's talking about heavenly treasures, his audience probably would have understood that to be rewards. Heavenly rewards for their faithfulness. So he encourages us to focus on things that have eternal consequences, things that don't go away, things that don't disappear, instead of collecting stuff and earthly things. Now, the best analogy I have for that is represented right here. The investments that the people that we have talked about today, especially Emma and Adrian, have made in our lives doesn't disappear. It doesn't go away. It doesn't just fade away because a thief cannot steal that from us. A thief cannot take those away. Moths cannot destroy it. Rust cannot do damage to it. Those are eternal investments. And that's what he's saying. I believe he's saying, put your heart there. Put your energy there. Put your resources there. Because that stuff, oh man, forever. Forever. It has eternal consequences and effects. And then there's this familiar verse for some of us in verse 21 where he says, and where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. And what does he mean by that? I think we talk about this pretty often, is that our heart attaches to the things that are most valuable to us. Oh, I can prove it. Look at your kids. Right? Yeah, your hearts are there. Our hearts are attached there. Look at your spouse, your friends, those you love. You look at them. Those of you that are grandparents really get it, right? You look at those grandkids, it's all over. Because your heart is there. It's strongly attached. That's what he's saying. He said, whatever you treasure, your heart's attached to it. And he's encouraging us, don't waste that on things that a little bug can take out. Don't waste that on something that a bad day in the stock market will empty it. Don't waste it on that. Put it in things that matter. Put it in relationships that matter. Then he says something that to me is a little strange, but I think it's because culturally it's different for us. He talks about our eyes and health. So when he says this, if we look at verse 22, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. This actually was his audience would have been familiar with this. It was an expression. It was a way of talking about generosity and stinginess. And so if someone said you had a good eye or a healthy eye, that meant you were generous. And if you had a bad eye or an unhealthy eye, it meant you were stingy. So he's talking about that, and he's saying that we want to be healthy as people, like a good eye. We want to be generous people versus stingy people. Or are we defined by generosity, or are we defined by holding tight to things? Now, he's certainly not limiting this to money. I think he's not voiding. I don't think he's taking money out of it because he mentions it in the end. But I don't think that that's anywhere close to all of what he's saying. I think he's talking about our posture and our attitude in general. Are we generous people? Are we generous people? Are we people that want to give of our resources, of our time, of our emotion, which is sometimes harder than giving of our money? I mean, it's a lot easier for me to pull out my wallet and just buy somebody dinner or this than it is for me to listen to them. And to be generous with my time and my heart, that's hard. That's hard. And I think that's what he's calling us to. And then he says something kind of shocking in verse 23. He says, if the light within you is darkness, then how great is that darkness? What? I mean, I think his audience would go, huh? Because why? Because light can't be dark. It's a strange play on words, isn't it? A little earlier, 2 weeks ago, we talked about where he said, salt loses its saltiness. How can salt be unsalty, right? It's like, so what is he doing? He's making a point. Jesus was the greatest teacher ever. And he's shocking them a little bit. And he's saying, you know what? You can't be light and dark. Can't be both. You're one or the other. You're light or you're dark. So I think that our generosity or our stinginess, whatever that posture is, and if you're like me, you probably move in and out of both of those. It's not just of one or the other. We're both of those at times, right? It reveals our heart. It shows our heart. Because Jesus says we attach our heart to the things that we treasure. And then in verse 24, he says, no one can serve two masters. Actually, I wasn't aware of this, but it was almost unheard of for a slave to be owned by two masters. And sometimes it would happen where if someone died and the children inherited the slaves, that they would have co-ownership, but it would almost always need to be worked out. Because why? Because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And Jesus says, because somebody's going to win. Somebody is going to get the wholeheartedness. We don't just split ourselves, right? So your heart can't belay, and he's very specific on this one. Your heart can't belong to God and to money, is what he's saying. It's like serving two masters. One is going to capture your heart. We talk about this in giving fairly frequently. Part of the encouragement, truly, my encouragement to you in giving is it aligns our heart. Because something happens when we take that money and we say, God, this money this week, I recognize it's really a gift from you, and I'm going to break that tie I have with my money, and I'm going to express trust to you, and I'm going to give it to your service. And it's important, and it becomes part of aligning our hearts properly. So here's what I think Jesus is saying to us. Who has your heart? Who has your heart? I think that's part of his point. So let's talk about that in a minute. I think there's an enemy to generosity. And there's probably multiple. But for most of us, I think there's one big enemy to generosity. When we desire to be generous or do something for other people or extend ourselves some way, there's often tension, great tension. Let me give you an example. This is the best way I know to unpack this. And I think this scenario has happened to me several times probably in my life. Let's say you're in Walmart. Everybody shop Walmart? Everybody good at that? Okay, let's say you're in Walmart and they're in line. And if you're in Walmart these days, lately, it seems like there's just not enough people working most of the time and there's long lines, right? So you're in line and you notice that in front of you, or a little bit in front of you, is a young mother with two kids. And she's struggling because, one of the kids is screaming. You guys know how it is. You're trying to shop, and they're adding the cashier is adding up the bill, and you can tell she's anxious. You can tell she's anxious. She's got her money out, and she's kind of looking at her money, and she's trying to figure out what she's going to do. And she's waiting, and she hears this is how much it is, and you can just feel it. You guys have probably seen this too. You can feel the anxiety of this mom. And she gets out her money, and she pays the lady. And she's got, try to figure out how to get her groceries and get her kids. And she goes outside and you check out, you're good to go. And go to your car, open up back your car, throw your groceries in, and you look. And there she is. And she's walking through the parking lot. And she's got kids in tow and groceries in tow. And you see there's no car. She's trying to figure out how to get home with her kids and her groceries. So here's my point of the tension. We feel tension in those moments, don't we? And here's part of the tension, the thoughts and the emotions that run through me. Maybe you can relate to some of those. How far will she have to walk with those groceries and those kids? And if she's heading towards the highway, is she going to be able to keep the kids safe and be able to walk down that road? Or is she going to try to find some back way, and is that going to be safe? Are they going to be safe? You guys feel that too, right? You wonder about that, and you're like, oh my gosh, can she do this? Is she going to be able to do that? And then I feel this other tension that says, should I help her? Should I pull up and say, get in. How far are you going? Throw your groceries in the back. Grab your kids and get in. But is that safe for me to do that? And if my kid's in the car, is that okay? We're in a COVID world too. It makes it even more complicated. Is it okay? Should I do that? Should I have bought her groceries? I saw her struggling. Do I have enough money for my groceries this week and to buy her groceries? Should I have done that? And if I do offer her a ride, well, does that mean I'm going to do more for her? How much time is this going to cost me? You get the point? There's tension, isn't there? I think as people of faith in Christ, almost all of us feel this need that we want to do something, but we feel this tension of what do I do, God? What do I do? Would she even feel safe about getting in my car? I don't know if I should be generous. So here's my point. The enemy of generosity is fear. It's fear. Sometimes it's founded. There's some times that we don't need to pick up that stranger and put in our car. I'm not suggesting to you that every stranger you see you put in your car. I had to remind my husband of that in our early years of marriage. He is a lover of all things stray. And I just would hold my breath. And there have times that there were people that we didn't know before we had Molly that he would bring to our home. And I love that. I love that about him. I love that about him. And I would listen to the voice of fear more than he would. So my point is that oftentimes I think we want to be generous, and fear says, don't do that. Don't do that. So is sometimes it inappropriate to be generous? Probably, yeah. And sometimes it is appropriate to say, fear, forget it. This one's for Jesus. I'm helping that person. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it is. How do you know the difference? You have to, it's faith. It's trust. It's trust. You have to step into that. So there's tension here. We feel both. We feel the need to help, and we feel the fear of what might happen if we don't. But here's what I'm sure of. The involvement in lives of other people is always going to cost us something. It's going to cost us time. It's going to cost us emotion. It might cost us a little bit of money. It's going to cost us something. And I think that for most of us, the greatest enemy for living a generous life, it's fear. It shows up more than just at the cashiers at the local Walmart, though. It shows up in other places. Our desire or call to live a life of generosity also shows up in how we prepare for our retirement. It does. It also shows up in things like how we guard our stuff. How tightly do we hold on to that? It shows up in the amount of hours that we work. It does that too. It shows up in how we get involved or avoid involvement with people who need help. Our desire to be generous and the fear that screams in our ears is present in all of those things. Now, I think that for me, many times when I think about being generous, but I'm holding on too tightly to my time and my resources, I use a word to talk about that makes me feel better. And that word is security. Anybody else like that word? And I'm just going to tell you, women, we really like that word. We like the word security. Guys, I'm not saying you don't too, but it drives us. We like the word security. And so oftentimes my justification for not doing something that, by golly, I know I'm supposed to do it, is I say because I like the security of having this. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel okay. And then I'm reminded that we live a life of faith. We live a life of faith. Now, hear me, guys. I'm not suggesting that we don't have 401ks. We have them. It's good. I'm not suggesting you don't work overtime so you have a little bit more room in your budget. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am saying is what Jesus is teaching, is that we better be careful what we attach our heart to. Better be careful what we attach our heart to. And if we're holding on too tightly to our stuff to feel safe, then there's a chance that we've made security our God. And what that means is, if I get everything in place, God, if I get that 401 just where I want it, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure that number just keeps getting bigger. You know, it does. What you think, what you want, just keeps going further away. Have you ever noticed that? If I get everything in place, if I get the amount of savings I need, and I get the house paid off, whew, that'd feel good. Wouldn't that feel good, Mike? If we get that done, and we get the cars paid off, get everything in, then I don't have to worry anymore. Everything's okay. Then, oh yeah, then I can be generous. Then I can take care of it. But do you see what that posture is? It's pretty close to, then I won't have to worry about God letting me down. Then I won't have to wonder if God is going to be faithful. Those things aren't bad. Not bad at all. It's appropriate to plan for our future. I get it. But the challenge I'm making this morning is the one I believe Jesus was making. It says, be careful where you attach your heart. Be careful. Be careful. Because if you allow money and things and security even to have your heart, you're not going to serve God and that. We don't divide ourselves that way. We go one direction or we go another. I think we can evaluate, how are we doing living a generous life? Does fear stop us? What do we invest in our energy in the most? Things that have eternal impact? Things like relationships with your grandkids. I think about these two. I think about Emma especially and how much she loved her grandkids. This is a life well lived. Her life was a life well lived as she built up treasures in heaven and not just treasures here. And I think that that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying invest in things that matter and quit worrying about the things that don't. Invest in, put your energy, pray fervently for your neighbor. Pray for Kimber this week. Pray for Theodore this week. Invest in things that make a difference. Stop worrying about the things that don't. Here's our big idea today. A living faith produces a generous life. A living faith produces a generous life. What does that mean? It means, guys, if we're going to live a generous life, it's going to involve some risk. It is. It's going to involve some risk. I'm not saying be reckless. I'm not saying be crazy. No, I'm saying ask God to show you through His Spirit what you're supposed to do and go do it. Do it. Don't hold back. Go all in. I'm really proud. I said this a few weeks ago, but I think it's appropriate here again. Of all the things, we've made some updates to the sanctuary, and I am proud of this space. But of the 2.5 years that I have been here, you know what I'm most proud of? I'm most proud of the faith step that this church took to say, we're going to take 10% of everything God gives us, and we're going to give it back to those that need it. And it didn't really look very good, to be honest with you, in the budget. You guys saw that. It just didn't look so good. I mean, it really wasn't there. And we take 10% off the top. It doesn't matter if it comes in from the barbecue or if it comes in from the holiday event or if it comes in the offering plate. And it's going to community need. And we've been able to do some things. It's just been so exciting. We've been able to help a family who needed medication for their kid. We've given money to the Gideons for Bibles. We've sent money to Honduras. I think we've done that one more than once. We've supported missionaries. We've helped families at Christmas, and we're going to be doing that again, right, Kevin? I meant to text you about that earlier this week. We've helped some folks who lost work temporarily during the COVID stuff. We've helped the guys at Ground 40. I mean, and we've done more than that. But we've said this money's not for us. Now, the truth is, we didn't know how we were going to pay for this. We didn't know how we were going to pay for all the renovations, but it didn't matter. Because ultimately, we have to look out. We have to look out. And you know what God did? He gave us everything we needed right here. That's what He does. It's incredible. See, if we wait until we're secure to be generous, guess what's going to happen? You're never going to be generous. The line just keeps moving. It just keeps moving. They've asked people that make $20,000 a year and said, what would make you comfortable? And they said, well, if I made 30, I would be good shape. And they asked people that make 100,000, how much money do you need to be comfortable? And they're like, if I make 150, here's the real shocker. They ask people that make $1 million a year, how much money do you need to be comfortable? And they say $2 million. It never stops. That's what happens when we attach our heart to anything other than God. And I think that is what He's saying here. He's saying that we've got to take steps of faith and generosity. I'm excited for our church because I've seen us be courageous. And I believe that a life of a church that is generous is a church that affects their community for Christ. And we desire that, and I believe that we're doing that. So, do you exercise faith in your giving? not just your money. I say it, church doesn't need your money. We need to give so that God can align our hearts to Him. Oh, God's been so faithful here, providing what we need. But man, it does something when we give. It does something. How are you doing living a generous life with your time, with your resources, with everything you have? Every single thing we have is a tool that God can use for His kingdom. How are you doing that? Jonathan, you brought the wrong guitar today. I meant to tell you, but Jonathan has this beautiful guitar. It's a Gibson. You guys know guitars. You know it's a pretty good guitar. It's gold. You've seen it. Not real gold, but it's gold color. It's a beautiful guitar. If I look at that guitar and I said to Jonathan, not this one's got cords hanging out of it, but the other one, and I said, man, that is a nice guitar. That thing plays some beautiful music. That thing, man, it's just great. And he's going to look at me. What are you going to say? Well, it plays beautiful music if I pick it up, play it. But if I pick up that guitar and start playing it, it's going to have nice tone, but it's going to sound horrible because, well, I don't play guitar, right? So what's the point, Marty? It's this. You've been given tools in your hands, and many of them are beautiful, incredible. They're powerful. Are you using them? Are you using them generously, offering those to God? A living faith produces a generous life. It's going to require faith. How is your faith reflected in how you give yourself away? Emma did it well. I watched it. Adrian did it well as well, and I'm proud of that. What's stopping you? Is fear stopping you? It does me sometimes. Fear is the enemy of generosity. We battle that with prayer. I think Jesus' words to us are build up treasures that last. Invest in the eternal. That's my challenge for us today, too. Let's pray. God, there are